In 2017, Alabama went into a game with over 10 active players. But little did they know, by the end of the game, they would be playing with just 3 players. It all started with 6-1 Alabama going up against 7-0 Minnesota in the championship game of the Barclays Classic. Everything was completely normal in the first half. Minnesota had a 12-point lead after being ahead most of the game, while Alabama, on the other hand, was looking to do whatever they can to rally back from behind. But the second half of what was a normal game would be everything but normal. With 14 minutes left in the second half, Colin Sexton got tripped by his own player, which led Nate Mason to think he just did something. This would lead to a little argument between Mason and Sexton, which would result in both of them getting technicals. Nate Mason would actually keep talking so much that he would get a second technical and even be ejected from the game. Yes, the first person to be ejected from this game wasn't even playing for Alabama. And this was huge in the game too, because Nate Mason had 20 points and 3 assists in just 23 minutes of play. He was having himself a game before he got ejected. But after all of that, everything would be back to normal, right? Absolutely not. Less than 20 seconds later, 2 dudes were squaring up. This of course caused Alabama's bench to clear and run on the floor to defend their teammate, which is a completely normal reaction to the situation. But it's an NCAA rule: if you leave the bench during a brawl or any situation like this one, then you're automatically ejected. Which seems harsh because you could be running on the floor to separate the fight, but the rules are there to prevent teams from going to war after 2 dudes start fighting, which we've seen several times in the past and even in the NBA. When this rule actually does come into effect, 1 to 3 players are usually ejected, but what makes this situation so crazy is the fact that Alabama's entire bench was ejected. Not just a few players, but their entire bench. They didn't even really run on the court either, and number 5 Avery Johnson was clearly seen holding players back, but they still got up and started walking over, which caused the ejections. The whole fight started with 2 bigs fighting over a rebound. It was the most basketball fight you could imagine too, both players within striking distance flexing at each other and just talking. No punches were ever gonna be thrown in this one. But after this situation, it led Alabama left with just 5 players. Alabama would be left with no subs for the rest of the game, which is already unheard of. The announcers were dumbfounded that Alabama was playing with just 5 players, but the worst part is that number 12 Dazan Ingram had 4 fouls, and just a few minutes later would pick up his 5th foul and foul out of the game. This is another difference between the NBA and college. In the NBA, if you only have 5 players and someone fouls out, then that player gets to keep playing, but the other team also receives a technical free throw for every foul. This is so a team would never have under 5 players for a game, but in college basketball, it's a completely free game, which is amazing. But at this point, they're down 11 and only have 4 players. Their offense doesn't look that bad because of Colin Sexton, who I'll get to later, and they also ran a 2-2 zone on defense. But the 4-on-5 game wouldn't last very long, because just a couple minutes later, John Petty goes up for a 3 and lands on the defender's foot, spraining his ankle. What are the odds that someone goes out for the game with an injury when you already have just 4 players? He ended up getting helped off the court, and Alabama will have to continue with just 3 players. And now they're still down 13 points with 10:41 left in the game. The announcers at this point were in just disbelief. Nobody had ever seen anything like this.
Of all the things I've ever seen at a sporting event, I never thought I would say this. Alabama is playing 3-on-5 against Minnesota.
But if you're Alabama playing with 3 guys, you're just trying to get this game over with. Not Colin Sexton though. Sexton was a big name in high school, and he took this as an opportunity to showcase his skill, and it worked perfectly. Alabama's offense would just try to swing it around an ISO against Minnesota's double team, and they actually played a 1-2 zone on defense. Alabama did play really solid defense for only having 3 dudes, but the thing that hurt Minnesota the most is they just had no idea what to do. Every time you get the ball, you have a shot, which made them think twice and either miss or just take an unnecessary shot. They would score the first few possessions, but this is where things started to take a turn. With 6:18 left in the game, Alabama's down 15 points, and that lead looks like it's only going up. But after a 3 from Colin Sexton and then a steal on the other end, which led to another basket, they're starting to gain some momentum. Minnesota would score, but Sexton would somehow escape a double team and hit a wild fadeaway 3. Then with 3 minutes left in the game down 10 points, Sexton would come back down the court and hit a 3 from the exact same spot. After that, Galen Smith would be fouled on a rebound and would knock down both free throws to cut the lead to just 5. Also note that Galen Smith didn't get any minutes in the game before this one. A few possessions later, Sexton gets the rebound and takes it coast to coast to make it just a 1-possession game. With just 3 players, they came all the way back from a 15-point deficit. What everybody thought was just going to be a spectacle to watch turned into an actual nail-biter. But unfortunately, this is where Alabama would start to fall short. Sexton would miss a shot to bring it within 1, and Minnesota would come down on the other end and get an and 1. There just simply wasn't enough time to complete the comeback. If the game was just 3 minutes longer, Alabama seriously could have won that game. Colin Sexton would hit 2 more free throws with just 0.8 seconds left to give him 40 points on the night. 31 of his points, by the way, came in the second half. 23 of those points came while playing 3-on-5. With just 3 players for a fourth of the game, they only lost by 5 and actually outscored Minnesota with just 3 players. Even Minnesota's head coach Richard Pitino said he's never seen anything like that in his life and that Colin Sexton could beat an entire team by himself. Then the following year, with no surprise, of course, Colin Sexton gets drafted 8th overall to the Cavs. Just going back and looking at that empty Alabama bench is crazy. The whole experience of watching a game go from completely normal to playing with 5 players, then 4, and then somehow 3, it's just unheard of. The other Alabama players should have just fouled out so we could see what it would be like for Sexton to play 1-on-5. But seriously though, respect to all 3 of them for not giving up on a game that most people would, even though it was a championship. It was something I got to witness live, and actually seeing it unfold as it happened was something that I can't even explain. It was definitely one of the greatest what-if comebacks in sports history.